Welcome to this ordinary meeting of Huntersville Council, number 4479. I'd like to start by acknowledging the Wallamedical people of the Eora Nation, the traditional owners or traditional custodians of the land on which we meet, and the waters that surround. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging.
We thank you, Lord, for the honour of being called by our fellow citizens to this office of honour and trust. Give us grace, diligently and honourably, free from private interest or prejudice, to discharge the duties entrusted to us to the common good and as in your sight, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Thank you. Welcome to tonight's meeting of Council. Council meetings continue to be run under the COVID-19 emergency arrangements, and there are many things which need to be done in a different way to what has occurred previously. Many councillors and senior staff are attending and participating in the meeting via video, audio-video links, whilst members of the public are viewing the meeting through a link provided on Council's website. The arrangements put in place by Council for this meeting are in line with the legislation recently enacted by the State Government to assist the efficient and effective operation of Council meetings during this difficult period. Whilst members of the public will not be able to participate in the meeting process in real time, an opportunity has been created for the public to send their submissions about individual items of business and for those to be read out by Council staff prior to discussion of the item. I seek your patience and understanding should any issues occur whilst we're adapting to new arrangements. We are certainly attempting to do our best in these trying circumstances. First item, I will go slowly. This is a very new experience for me, but first item is attendance and apologies. Obviously, we have an apology from the Mayor, Councillor Mark Bennett.
And Councillor McLaughlin.
And we also have an apology from Councillor McLaughlin. Do we have the next item? Do we have any declarations of interest?
Sorry, I think Councillor Williams wants to ask something.
Sorry, Councillor Williams.
Whoops, I'm happy to move the apologies for those two councillors.
Good, thank you, Councillor Williams. Seconded, Councillor Miles. All those in favour of accepting the apologies? Unanimous, I presume. Right. Next item is confirmation of the minutes of meeting 4478.
Declarations of interest.
Oh, sorry, declarations of interest. I did ask for them earlier, but was delayed through the apologies. Are there any declarations of interest? Okay, no response on that one. Okay, we move on to the minutes for meeting number 4478. Moved Councillor Williams, seconded Councillor Crassoy. Those in favour of accepting.
Can I sort of add something to the minutes? I moved some information in general business, item 6 in the minutes, and my reading of the minutes, that is not there. I was just wondering, could that be included in the minutes? And the advice I gave to Council, that Councillor Williams advised Council that he has been appointed as the LG New South Wales representative to the Sydney Water Community Advisory Committee.
Good. Thank you. I recall that last.
Through you, Mr. Chairperson, we can make that amendment or addition.
Thank you, General Manager. Anything else we need to deal with before we move that the minutes be adopted? Okay, those in favour of adopting the minutes? Thank you.
Unanimous.
Unanimous again. Okay.
Item 3.1.
Okay, I'm in the awkward position of having moved item 3.1, of having to asked for it to be moved and seconded from the chair. I'm happy to move. Councillor Williams has seconded.
Just add some speakers.
Yes, we do have a number of speakers on this. Christina, sorry, Ms. Pars will read out the submissions. We do have quite a number on this one, I know.
Thanks, Mr. Chairperson. The first speaker is a supporter, and it's Phil Jenkin on AM. I make this submission in the format of an address to be read out to Council at its meeting on 25 May because of the COVID-19 restrictions against personal attendance. Prior to the Council business paper for this meeting of 25 May, which went online on 21 May, the only public information that I could find on any possible alteration or upgrade to the Council chamber appears on Council website in a business paper for the local planning panel, LPP meeting 11, held 19 December 2019, pages 93 to 110, and later minutes of a Conservation Advisory Panel, CAP meeting, held 20 November 2019, and a Councillor Weekly Bulletin of 9 April 2020 at page 5. Any public consultation appears to have been confined to residents surrounding the Town Hall. It is my strong view that Council chamber should not be altered as it has considerable heritage significance and is fit for purpose. In addition, it is clear that proper process has not been followed and there has been inadequate public consultation. In the LPP business paper under comments on page 96, see now pages 17, 18 and 32 of business paper 25 May, appears these words: the facade of the original Council chambers dating from 1866 has been preserved after the rest of the building was destroyed by fire in 1978. New Council chambers, a hall and administrative facilities were constructed behind the retained facade to a design prepared by the renowned architect Colonel Madigan of Edwards, Madigan, Torzillo and Briggs. The fabric and spaces of this stage of the construction are considered to possess heritage significance for the association with the continuity of occupancy and use by Hunters Hill Council, for the association with the architect, Colonel Madigan, and in the case of the Council chamber, the post-war brutalist influences in the design and spatial qualities. The proposed widening of the doorway to the Council chamber and insertion of the two focus rooms at the north end would have a detrimental impact on the unique character and significance of the space at page 96. Under recommendation is included the words, to retain the existing raised dais at pages 96 and 102. And you can see that now on pages 32, 37 and 38 of the business paper, 25 May. The LPP determined inter alia that amended plans shall be submitted detailing the design of the focus rooms to retain the existing raised dais, in brackets, Council in meeting minutes in Council meeting paper 24 February 2020.
Moved Councillor Williams to extend. Seconded Councillor Miles. All in favour? Unanimous.
There has been no approval to remove the raised dais. No approval was ever sought or given to remove the raised seating for the gallery. What is clear is that the Council chamber is of heritage significance in its design that includes the raised dais and raised public gallery, in its unique character and spatial qualities, in its fabric and the fact that it was designed by a renowned architect, and the continuity for occupancy and use by Hunters Hill Council. That is also my view, to which I would add the following. It has social and cultural heritage significance. The Council chamber is in reality the people's chamber. It is where our elected representatives sit and make decisions affecting our community. It is where we address the councillors on matters important to us. It is open to the community when council is meeting and for other important events. There is a continuous history in this very place from 1866. The present chamber, after the fire of 1978, has seen many significant debates and decisions made affecting our community, including over Kelly's Bush, the high school, the defence lands, our heritage generally, and our very existence. The list is extensive. There is a lot of history in this chamber. Having addressed a number of councils over the last decade, I must say that this chamber compares favourably with any other. It is brutally functional and fit for purpose. Like many parliaments and courts, it has stature. It is not a simple meeting room, and it works really well now for all kinds of meetings, including those of council committees and of staff. The issue is not about adaptive reuse or upgrade or modernisation or making the chamber pretty. It is intended for the council chamber to be kept for its present purposes. The issue in reality is all about respecting and conserving the municipality's history and heritage. Whether one looks at it from a heritage perspective, architecture, design, history, culture, or indeed as being fit for purpose, it must remain as is. The Conservation Advisory Panel, CAP, met on 20 November 2019. There was insufficient information about any detailed proposal concerning the council chamber itself. Before it was a heritage report from ArchNet Designs dealing with the outside ramp, airlock lift to the town hall. It includes the following statement. The significance of the town hall lies in its ability to demonstrate 19th and early 20th century civic architecture with a late 20th century design response to the trauma wrought by fire on the building by a venerable architect, Colonel Madigan of EMTB.
Move to extend Councillor Williams.
Councillor Miles.
Seconded Councillor Miles. All in favour? Unanimous.
It is located within the civic and in the heart of Hunters Hill, within the Peninsula Conservation Area and in the company of notable houses, churches, schools and commercial buildings such as the Garibaldi. See page 22 of the business paper 25 May. The panel considered that any proposed changes to the chamber be subject to further discussion in terms of the existing versus proposed layout. Its advice to council was that proposed works to the council chamber be subject to further consultation in the minutes of the council meeting 24 February 2020 at page 321. This matter has never returned to CAP with proper plans or a definitive proposal or at all. It should have if there is to be any proposal to change or upgrade the chamber. In light of the above, it is therefore very concerning to read on the council website the Councillor Weekly Bulletin for 9 April 2020. It states inter alia on page 5, in relation to the council chambers, feedback from councillors in relation to the chamber has been incorporated into the plans. The works in the chamber will include removing the raised platforms at the rear and front of the chamber to improve access, covering the brick walls with gyprock to provide a more contemporary space whilst retaining the original brick walls, retaining the current door width but with replacement of the solid doors with glass to provide greater visibility. Apparently, the idea of having 2 focus rooms for staff within the chamber has now been dropped. Such works set out above clearly fly in the face of its heritage significance and can't proceed. In addition, the council, in my view, does not have approval to make these changes. The works, as in the weekly bulletin, have not been placed properly before the LPP and no approval for them can be inferred. It hasn't gone back to CAP as it should have and must if a proposal to change or alter the People's Chamber is to go forward. There has also been grossly inadequate consultation with the Hunters Hill community over this matter. I feel strongly about this. Having expressed the above views, including on heritage, I perhaps am obliged to add the following. I own with my wife a heritage stone house called Yandra from 1894. that I have restored, including inside rooms. I was the chair of the National Trust Vienna Cottage Committee from 1982 to 1992 that raised the monies to purchase and preserve the cottage and prepared with Meredith Walker AM and Clive Lucas OBE the initial conservation plan. In 2010 received the National Trust of Australia New South Wales Lifetime Achievement Award for my contribution to heritage conservation. Given the importance of this matter, I will distribute this submission to all councillors, senior staff, members of CAP, the National Trust, the President of Hunters Hill Trust, and to the 2 former popularly elected mayors. As you're aware, I'm a strong supporter of a Hunters Hill Council that respects, conserves, and protects the municipality's history and heritage. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. The second address is from Ms. Sue Hoopman, also a supporter. Such a shame to see the history of Hunters Hill being eroded. History that so many have worked so hard to preserve over such a long period of time, being eroded without the residents' knowledge and for the reason is oblique. And the reason is oblique. As it is now, the council chamber portrays an atmosphere of respect that it has earned for over 50 years. It is hard to imagine a flat walk-through area able to do the same. Where is the respect of the office? How wise is it to spend all this money when there has been no promise of a stable, independent future for Hunters Hill? Or can the 2 Liberal endorsed councillors guarantee this promise? Sue, thank you. The next address is also a supporter from Helen Temple-Berry. I understand that Council is considering a proposal to put forward by Council staff to alter the interior of the Hunters Hill Town Hall, and in particular the Council chamber. I further understand that these alterations include widening the entry of the chamber and replacing the doors with sliding glass doors, removing the raised dais, removal of the raked gallery seating, and plasterboarding the exposed brick walls. I believe these changes will change the character of this chamber and compromise the heritage value of the town hall. Hunters Hill is one of the earliest municipalities in Australia, proclaimed in 1861. The majority of the suburb is a conservation area. The first council chamber was sandstone and opened in 1866. It was added to in 1902 and 1938. In 1978, the town hall was partly destroyed in fire. The council appointed well-known architect Paul Madigan from Edwards, Madigan, Torzillo and Briggs to work with the surviving historic fabric and carefully and cleverly recreate the town hall. Council chamber and administrative offices in its own respectful but contemporary style. The complex has heritage significance and embodying its history in the 19th, 20th and 21st centuries. The site has been used continuously as the centre of our local council for 154 years. It is the fulcrum of our municipality and our local government representation. It sits on the municipal land and belongs to the ratepayers. Our elected local government councillors act on our behalf and also have obligations to us. These include what happens to our council meeting place. I believe that the proposal, which may be considered to compromise the heritage significance of the chamber, should be subject to a heritage evaluation and community consultation. In the first instance, these proposals should be referred to Council's Conservation Advisory Panel, known as CAP. This expert panel provides monthly advice to Council on all issues affecting the heritage of the suburb. The members offer their time voluntarily, and the CAP have been a most successful cornerstone of the planning process in Hunters Hill for many decades. CAP met in November 2019 to look at a number of external access issues regarding the town hall. They asked for further information and were not briefed about any internal modifications. In spite of COVID-19 restrictions, it is remarkable to me that CAP has not met in
Moved Councillor
2020.
Williams, seconded Councillor Crassoy. In favour? All in favour? Unanimous again.
So in spite of COVID-19 restrictions, it is remarkable to me that CAP has not met in 2020 or been invited to comment via media connections such as Zoom. This issue concerning the council chamber is one of a number of significant current issues that I have become aware of recently, all worthy of advice from CAP to council staff. In conclusion, I request council to defer decision on this issue until CAP has fully considered the proposal and also to provide for broader community consultation. Thank you. The next address is also a supporter, and it is Mr. Richard Quinn. Dear Mayor and Councillors, as you discuss and consider approval for a possible refurbishment of and functional improvements to the council chamber, I offer the following reflections and comments for your consideration. Whilst others may comment in more detail on the heritage significance of the council chamber, my reflections are more focused on the primary purpose, function and ordering of the chamber. Since 1861, Huntersville Council has played a significant role in the life of our local community, both as a democratic representation institution and as a community of interest institution. The convening of council meetings has always been central to our local democracy, where our successive mayors and councillors have come together to discuss, debate, resolve and decide on a broad range of local issues, with the best interests and common good of our local community as their primary motivation and purpose. Our historic council building, whilst badly damaged by fire some decades ago, is the communal and physical heart of the municipality, deliberately constructed by our forebears in a prominent location to remind all of the importance of good local representation in our lives as a community. The council chamber is the central element of the council building. It is the foremost public space of the council and the principal site in which the fundamental representation of the community takes place, just as parliamentary chambers are the central elements of Houses of Parliament. Parliaments and parliamentary buildings are more than just institutions and places where elected representatives meet and consider legislation. They have a symbolic role as the theatre of state, and the buildings themselves often come to represent or reinforce ideas of national identity, which comes from Clement McIntyre, Parliamentary Architecture and Political Culture, APH, Senate Occasional Lecture Series from 2008. The regular sightings of elected councillors at ordinary meetings, the participation of our community, the electors in those meetings, and certain civic ritual occasions are, in my view, the foremost considerations in the design and layout of the chamber. All other considerations in the design process should serve and never supplant these primary purposes of the chamber. Any consideration of refurbishment and ordering of all elements of the chamber space necessitates that care be given to establishing the spatial symbolic relationships between places of the mayor's chair, councillors seating, executive officers seating, the lectern for public addresses, the council coat of arms.
Moved Councillor Williams, seconded Councillor Miles. In favour of continuing?
The councillors' coat of arms,
Majority there.
flags, the public entrance and other ritual places and symbolic elements, including those that reflect the heritage of the chamber and our municipality. Where possible, a more generous spatial allocation for and high quality furnishing of these elements can reinforce their inherent symbolic and local heritage significance. The chamber is not merely a utilitarian meeting room, but signifies in its material structure the focal point of local democracy and the important debates and decisions that take place there. Indeed, the chamber strongly signifies the council, which gathers therein, and therefore it has much greater symbolic significance than any other meeting room. As you consider an appropriate refurbishment of and functional improvements to the council chamber, I urge you to first reflect on the significant design principles and symbolic relationships that enhance council meetings and civic occasions. By presenting within our council building an adaptively reused, functional and contemporary space of noble simplicity rather than ostentation, and clearly evident symbolic and heritage elements, a carefully considered design outcome will hopefully ensure that the council chamber continues to be the symbolic and democratic heart of our community, as it has done since 1861. Yours faithfully, Richard Wynne. He then goes on to note some similar project. He has similar project notes and provides some website information for the Historic Council Chamber for the City of Sydney, which required significant functional improvements to accommodate audio, visual and computer technologies, furniture and an appropriate lighting and acoustic environment for contemporary council uses. And the works extended to conserve history, fabric, provide new symbolic elements of the Lord Mayor's setting and integrating the arts of immense stella into new rugs for the room. Recycled timbers, stainless steel and bronze, cast and plate were used to make the new furniture. And then the last address is also a supporter, and the address is from Dr. Alistair Sharp. Thank you for the opportunity to address your meeting. I wish to support Councillor Sanderson and his reasons for seeking meaningful consultation about modifications to the chamber, and in particular the request that the Conservation Advisory Panel be asked to assess the proposed works in their current form and the public exhibition of the proposals. I understand that Council is proposing two types of change to the Town Hall. One is about bringing the Town Hall and its facilities up to current standards, including disability access and a better interface with visitors. The other is to modernise the chamber. I find the first of these relatively uncontroversial, but given the heritage and functional aspects, any changes to the council chamber must be taken to public exhibition to allow the community to express their views before the changes are brought to council. After all, the Town Hall doesn't belong to the council, it belongs to the citizens of Hunters Hill. We elect the mayor and councillors to represent us. As such, it is appropriate for citizens to be consulted, as happens with other important issues. The importance of preserving heritage is recognised as one of the aims of Hunters Hill's local environment plan. Heritage is also recognised in the community's strategic plan, in which the first of 12 items listed as what we've learned from you is that Hunters Hill wants its council to focus on preservation of heritage and character. Now, the use of the term heritage in these documents is referring to the general concept of heritage, not the mere restricted category of items that are listed in a heritage schedule. In the past, heritage was often understood to mean old, but today the New South Wales Department of Environment website states that built heritage is one of our most important cultural assets, being the physical evidence of our cultural development. Built heritage describes our origins and informs our understandings of who we are today. It helps to define a sense of place, an identity for a community. It can contribute to feelings of connectedness and community pride and confidence. As quoted in Councillor Sanderson's report, the reconstructed Town Hall, which includes the Council Chamber, is considered to possess heritage significance for the association with the continuity of occupancy and use by Hunters Hill Council, and in the case of the Council Chamber, the post-war brutalist influences in the design and spatial qualities. I hope you will adopt Councillor Sanderson's recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you for those readings. The job so far has been more difficult than mine. Having put the motion, I think I should first of all make one correction to it, if I could.
Mr. Chairperson, I think Councillor Miles.
Sorry, Councillor Miles.
Sorry, Mr. Acting Mayor. Could I just, for clarity's sake, given a couple of the speakers' comments, get through you, the General Manager, to run us through the process that's occurred so far?
General Manager.
Through you, Mr. Chairperson, I'll ask the Director Development to step the Council through the process to date. Thank you, Director.
Through you, Chair, George. With regard to the works at the Chamber, there was a formal development application submitted. Through that process, the application was notified to the immediate adjoining owners, and also signage put on the subject site in accordance with our development control plan and our notification policy, and also our community participation plan. Through that process, we engaged an independent planner, architect, heritage expert to consider the application. Since it's our property and an interest would be formed under the LPP process guidelines, the application would have to go automatically to the LPP, Local Planning Panel. All such applications go there. We all engaged a heritage expert, architect, to prepare the plans. We then gave it to an independent heritage expert planner, architect, to consider the plans, went through the process of notification, considered the application in detail, considered all the statements, heritage statements, statement of environmental effects, and all the detail, and those plans were reported to the department, considered also by the Conservation Advisory Panel, and those comments were also put into the report. And that report went to the formal Local Planning Panel, where they considered the report and agreed with the recommendation.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Williams. Councillor Williams?
No.
Yep, trying to unmute. Can I ask a question of the through you, Mr. Acting Mayor, and the General Manager? The references made there to the Conservation Advisory Panel agreeing to the process. I chair that panel, and my recollection is that they were not in the position to make a decision because there wasn't adequate information. I was just wondering whether we could get clarification as to what the position of CAP is, because my understanding was that they did not sign off on it. They were concerned that there wasn't adequate information. Is my recollection correct, or as portrayed by the staff?
Through you, Mr. Chairperson, the Director of Development Services also attends the CAP, so he can explain the discussion that occurred when they considered the development application. And as councillors would be aware, that was modified, or the contents were also modified post-consultation with the councillors. So, Director, could you please explain what happened at the CAP based on those plans that were submitted and the elements that were subject to further discussion following the consultation?
Through you, Chair. At the CAP considered the plans. The plans with regard to the issues raised, and I take on board what the Chair said, there were issues with regard to clarification sought. The issue of clarification was, and issues raised as well, were those room pods had walls to be proposed, floor to ceiling, and the recommendation from there indicated that the pods be reduced in height to ensure it does not disturb the ceiling element. Issue with the stairs, the bias was raised as well, because we had no detailed information with regard to the air conditioning ducting under those stairs. That was left in the as part of the proposal, and those were conditions imposed via CAP and also addressed by the LPP. The CAP from memory, and I'll call from memory. The chair did raise that he was not satisfied with the detail provided at that meeting, but I have to refer to the CAP minutes were part of the proposed. But they're the two main elements raised from memory.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Having put the motion, I will have to speak to it, even though I'm in the chair, which I wasn't expecting tonight. I first start by thanking all of those who made submissions at tonight's meeting. We've heard from 2 emeritus mayors, the president of Huntersville Trust, and one of our citizens who has freedom of the municipality. They've made so many points that will probably briefen what I have to say about the motion. I'm also deeply concerned about protecting the heritage of this at our chamber, in which we normally meet. There are some very clear statements about the heritage value of the town hall, and in particular council chamber, which I cite in my report. I won't repeat them because they've been mentioned quite a number of times through the speakers who have submitted tonight. Heritage significance only deepens with time. However, this motion is not about, or is about process that should be taken or undertaken when a council is the applicant for consent to develop community facilities. The Town Hall and Chamber are, to quote Emeritus Mayor Quinn, the commercial or the communal and physical heart of the municipality, which must be respected by any process which alters them. Firstly, it is essential that there is meaningful community consultation about any proposal to develop community facilities. At the time, 17 neighbours were notified about this proposal and were invited to make submissions from 30 October to 13 November 2019. The only available drawings showed little detail of the alterations to the chamber. The titles on the drawing said nothing about the chamber. Those who received the notification could easily have not understood that the chamber was to be altered. There was a denial of the opportunity for the entire community to have their say about the treatment of what Mr. Jenkins refers to as the People's Chamber. On 20 November, Council's Conservation Advisory Panel, or CAP as it is known, faced the same dilemma of lack of information. As CAP effectively had a heritage or a statement of heritage impact that did not deal with the chamber and had little information about the changes to the chamber before it, on which it could advise, it simply advised that the proposed works to the chamber be subject to further consultation. Although council has sought heritage advice, in this case as the applicant, the heritage advice it received should be subject to the same scrutiny as heritage advice other applicants lodge with their applications. As should always happen, the applications that involve proposed development of a heritage item or development in a heritage conservation area, the application should go to CAP for advice. On this occasion, the information wasn't before CAP at the time it met, and it has not gone back to CAP for a second occasion. CAP was not given the opportunity to perform this scrutiny, as the original application was determined by the LPP on the 19th of December with conditions that prevent what the staff now propose to be proposed for the chamber. Finally, as set out in my report, the former council allocated funding for the town hall refurbishment stages 2 and 3. At the time that this council allocated further funding for Town Hall compliance, accessibility and upgrade to community areas in May 2019, it understood, as the description of the budget item would imply, that this funding was for Town Hall office refurbishment stages 2 and 3. As I recalled, proposed modifications to the council chamber arose some time later. In my view, if funds for the budget item Town Hall office refurbishment stages 2 and 3 are to be used to modify the chamber, then this should occur through a resolution of council. It is now agreed that a section 4.55 application for modification of consent to the LPP will be required if development of the chamber as proposed by staff is to proceed. If such an application is to proceed, it must be endorsed by the elected body of council. I do not believe this delegation for staff to make such an application. While funding was allocated, move to extend. Councillor Williams. Thank you. Councillor Crassel, Councillor Miles. Those in favour of extending? Thank you. Unanimous. While I do not believe there is a delegation for staff to make such an application, while funding was allocated for the Town Hall office refurbishment stages 2 and 3, I do not believe it has been allocated for modification of the chamber. To sum up, I am greatly concerned that we have a very important symbolic asset of council. Council is the applicant in this case. It is not the consent authority as it usually is. We should, in all these circumstances, be extremely careful about the process. We should be a model applicant. We cannot afford the shortcut process. We need to be stringent about scrutiny of the heritage advice that council has received. CAP is a process by which that can be done. We need to give the community the opportunity to have their say in how this council chamber should be treated. I will ask if there is anyone who wishes to speak against the motion.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairperson, you'll need a seconder.
Sorry?
We need a seconder.
We have a seconder in Councillor Williams already.
Thank you.
He had done so earlier. Okay, Councillor Miles.
Just a couple of questions, if you would, Mr. Acting Mayor. When you, in your recommendation, talk about meaningful consultation, obviously with a DA, there is a set of parameters for a DA that requires consultation. What do you mean by meaningful consultation? And are you suggesting that we didn't follow the process for a DA properly?
Well, Councillor Miles, as you would have heard in what I have said, and other people who have spoken on the matter from outside of council have said, at the time the application was made, the original application was made to the local planning panel, there was little information about what was to happen with the chamber. I believe seeing section 4.55 application is now required to modify that consent, that the change is of a sufficient magnitude to require that further consultation of the community should occur. It is, after all, a community asset that we are talking about.
Well, I will speak to it then, if you will, Mr. Acting Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Councillor Miles.
Mr. Miles. Yeah, I can't support the recommendation as it sits. There's obviously components of this recommendation that I am supportive of. What I want to avoid, though, is getting caught up in hamstringing what is an ongoing process being conducted by staff and obviously current works that are happening to the chamber. So it's quite obvious to me and to the other councillors that the facilities of the chamber and of the council as they are today are not adequate for what is required of the operations of council, and the staff have made that very clear to us. I would say that,
Williams, you have a point of order?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Reference is made to councillors being of a common opinion. I would think the more appropriate thing is some councillors. I certainly don't agree with the need to change the council chamber. So it should be some councillors.
Some councillors are in agreement with the staff that there needs to be a renovation of the council buildings and of the council chamber so that it can be used for the operations of council, for which it is used for 95% of its life. I have a lot of sentiment with some of the submissions that were put in there. It has to reflect what it is, which is the People's Chamber. It has to hold the significance of position of being something that is the central focus of the community, but that doesn't mean that it can't be also adaptively reused when it's not being used as the council chamber. I would, going to the recommendation itself, I think that meaningful consultation has occurred with the councillors. We have all participated in 2 workshops on this very issue. So to say that meaningful consultation hasn't happened with councillors, all of our views have been sought. I can say that most of the views of the councillors have been expressed. They're being expressed again this evening. We may not all be pointed in the same direction. Some people may disagree, but I think that what we need to do is end up tonight with a position of council that allows the staff to undertake the work that's already occurring and not hamstring a process that's underway. So in saying that, I will be foreshadowing a motion that council, number 1, recognise the importance of the chamber to the community as the people's chamber, and the importance of ensuring that it is flexible in design to be used for the purposes when not in use for council meetings. That number 2, that council proceed with the refurbishment of the chamber to apply contemporary accessible practice, remove the lift and provide a level floor in line with universal design principles. This will provide the same means of use for all users, identical wherever possible, equivalent when not, and avoid segregating or stigmatising any users. And number 3, that council follow the recommendation of the heritage consultant in the treatment of walls and appropriate lining, improving temperature and acoustics. That has been circulated to councillors obviously prior to the meeting, but I will foreshadow that motion if the motion on the floor is unsuccessful.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Do you have any further to say in your?
I'll speak to the foreshadowed motion if it gets to.
Yeah, oh, I mean against the existing.
No, I just again I take the view that we need to something needs to happen operationally to allow the staff to do their job better. And I didn't have any problems with what was contained in the heritage report, which made the recommendations involving the chamber. Obviously, there is a variety of views, and I take the positions of those making submissions and even of the other councillors that this has to be given specific importance, but I think that, you know, getting hampered down and into the minutiae of interior design in a council meeting, particularly with what's going on in the community at the moment with COVID and many other things, is probably not something that I'd be wishing to do. Obviously, it's on the floor tonight. We've had 2 workshops on this issue. I think that there is there may not be a unanimity of thought, but there is definitely a position that that I would say the majority of councillors hold, which is that the staff's recommendations and the adopted designs by the LPP, which will be subject now to a Section 455 modification, are consistent with what we think should go in the chamber, and of course that will be scrutinised by the local planning panel as it should be, and that is a public process that other people can participate in. I have no problem with it going back to CAP if CAP wants to meet in between now and the LPP meeting, but I don't think it's required to be in a recommendation. As I said, I think that talking about what's essentially interior design at the moment is probably not the best use of our time.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Anyone wish to speak in favour of the motion? Councillor Williams?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. Fortunately, we still live in a democracy, and regardless of the comments made by Councillor Miles that the majority of councillors agree with this decision should only be determined at a council meeting. And it is concerning that council does meet either workshops or briefings where the public have no opportunity to hear the issues, the concerns, and understand the positions of the various councillors. I certainly don't agree that this is a foregone conclusion. I certainly don't believe well, I hope no work has started in the chamber. Councillor Miles tend to imply that it's already occurring and we should just get on with it and it's only interior design. But anyway, what I wanted to say, Mr. Acting Mayor, stems from what we've just heard from our various local residents, and those people have lived and breathed Hunters Hill, have committed and contributed significantly to Hunters Hill, and I think their voice is an important one, along with a large number of Hunters Hill community that haven't had a chance to be involved in this process. Let me start by saying the community is council's priority. The community values are truly clear, and we've heard that tonight, that they want elected representatives to protect and conserve the rich heritage within our municipality. In any survey or consultation with the community, that is always made a priority by our community. So, it is proposed to remove, cover up the heritage attributes of the council chamber, the people's chamber. And I believe it is the people's chamber. It is our point of local democracy, which we fight and have fought for on several occasions. And we need to do this in line with the LEP and the CSP and the due process. So I support the motion on the basis that I don't think due process has been carried out. And I'm sure, based on some of the comments made tonight by our esteemed residents, that they would look for an opportunity to be involved in the process. In what I'll say from here, we'll set out 4 factors that need to be considered in the matter. The first is the heritage values, the need or justification, the fit for purpose, a costly indulgence, and I'll get on to that in a moment, and consultation. They're 4 key things that I think need to be considered and addressed and aired in our community. Now, heritage is not just facadism, and it's important that council practice what it preaches or what the community expects council to behave. And if we don't, then precedents will be set and others will follow to exploit that precedent. Council has to stand firm on heritage and on its values of cultural significance. So heritage, there's a definition for heritage. Heritage can refer to the practice or characteristics that have passed down through years from one generation to the next. Heritage is often used to discuss a cultural aspect or tradition that has been passed down through generations. It's not just about bricks and mortar. Heritage, as I said, is not facadism. It is a multi-dimensional concept that requires consideration of several factors. These include the history, the context, the social and cultural significance, and the fabric, what it's built of. All you have to do is to look into the Hunters Hill Trust Green Book, or is now republished the Blue Book, and you will see an expansive array of buildings that are key to our heritage values, and the Town Hall is one, and the Chamber. The book lists items from sandstone mansions in the early 1800s through to modest red brick bungalows of the 1970s. It goes to lengths to explain the association the buildings have with events and people who lived in them, and what is important about the fabric that distinguishes them. So it's not just about what they're made of, it's about what they've contributed to the community socially and culturally as well.
I'll move to extend. I'll move to extend. Councillor Miles, those in favour?
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. The Council Chamber is recognised, and I won't go into the details, it's quoted in the report to the LPP. It is clearly a significant heritage item that has status as a heritage item. It also has enormous cultural implications and importance in our community, and I think we've heard a lot of that from our esteemed residents. The Hunters Hill LEP of 2012 states that there is a requirement to conserve Aboriginal and European heritage that influences the character and identity of the municipality. This statement of the LEP is a general requirement to conserve heritage as opposed to conserving only heritage items. The Chamber has indisputable heritage and cultural significance, profound significance. Such proposed works clearly fly in the face of its heritage and cultural significance and can't be allowed to proceed. It will set an undesirable precedent, as I've said, that will be exploited to the detriment of the wider heritage values. Fit for purpose. We've heard from Councillor Miles that the building is not, or the Chamber is not fit for purpose. I dispute that. The Chamber is currently as it's currently formatted, has served the community for over 150 years for the purpose of a council chamber. There's no better functioning chamber in local government in New South Wales. It is an ideal setting where's the chamber? It has the stature and functionality fitting a chamber of local democracy, decision making, and a place of civic duty. I've been associated with the chamber for almost 40 years. Addressing from the gallery, sitting as an alderman and then a councillor around the table, and chairing meetings from the mayor's dais as the mayor. The unique feature it provides is that there is an uninterrupted line of sight for all participants, fostering transparency and participation. No matter where you sit in the chamber, you can actually see what's going on. A flat surface will mean you'll be looking at the back of people's heads and not being able to engage in the process in a meaningful way. It is a unique, intimate venue steeped in heritage and social significance. Like much in Hunters Hill, it is unique and should not be compared of what other councils had. I won't go into that. From my experience, there are no acoustic or lighting issues. As I said, I've sat in that chamber for at least 15 years as an alderman or councillor. Speech is clear and lighting is good. This is supported by the high quality live streaming where audio and video are appropriate. There are no reports to the contrary. We don't have an acoustics problem. We don't have a lightings problem. People watch it through live streaming and it is high quality. From my, the chamber has served the community and the local democracy well. It has demonstrated its capacity to meet the demands of a whole range of non-council meeting activities. And it's wrong to say it doesn't meet those requirements. It meets the LPP, it meets CAP, it meets the DCU requirements, it meets senior executive meetings, it meets staff meetings. You can fit 40 odd people in the gallery. We only have 50 staff. So to say that the chamber is not fit for purpose, I think is invalid and is blatantly wrong. It can be used for a range of, we've had a Levesinay information night in there and there was 90 people fitted into it in its current format. So it is blatantly wrong to say it's not fit for purpose. It is fit for purpose. So why change it? Got no idea. Next issue I wanted to raise quickly is cost. We're spending over $1 million on the town hall, and I could imagine the fit out and all the works that are going on in the chamber are probably $100,000. To me, that is a blatant waste of public money because it achieves nothing except diminishes our heritage and social and cultural significance. We need...
Councillor Crasso, or second, Councillor Miles. Those in favour?
I'm getting to the end, Mr. Mayor, so hopefully I can wind up soon. The last council meeting, council diverted funds away from pedestrian projects to a pedestrian crossing. To me, the better use of this money that's being used in the council chamber would be to restore that program of footpath repairs, not to have an indulgence for no gain to our community, but diminishes our community because of the loss of its historic and cultural significance. It's a folly. It has no meaning and does divert funds away from key infrastructure projects. So we then get on to the issue of consultation. And I think Councillor or the acting Mayor has raised those issues quite adequately. I just can't see why something of this significance isn't broadcast across our community. And I certainly believe that CAP has not had the chance to adequately address it. And that's required under our LEP. And I chair that meeting and I agree with Councillor or acting Mayor that committee or that panel has not had the opportunity to fully consider that matter, and therefore you can't proceed. So in conclusion, it is my strong view that the council chamber or the people's chamber should not be altered, as it has considerable heritage, cultural, and is fit for purpose. Funding could be better deployed to vital infrastructure works, and if proceeded with, will be viewed by the community, many in the community, as a wasteful indulgence reminiscent of some of the classic TV shows, Yes Minister, and I would urge people to have another look at Grassroots, which was an ABC program, probably aired before some of the councils were even born. But it's very relevant that councils or public officials shouldn't be doing things that are purely seen as indulgent, and to do something to a structure that diminishes it and that has no benefit because the building is fit for purpose, to me, it is wasteful. In addition, there's clearly been inadequate consultation, and it can be concluded proper process has not been followed to this date. And I would think that all that is needed in the chamber is to fit a mechanical lift to the dais to meet the access requirements. That is the total need in that chamber, and that is all that council should be considering to do in that location. So I strongly believe that the chamber should be left as it is, with a slight modification to allow accessibility to the dais. Thank you, Mr.
Councillor Williams. Does anyone wish to speak against the motion? Councillor Collins.
Thank you. I will be brief. I just want to start with the spending on it. Yeah, it is a lot of money that's been done to the town hall, but the main reason behind that, from my perspective, is to make it accessible. At the moment, it is completely inaccessible, both for staff, and obviously most of the money is going to be spent on the council offices, but there's no lift, there's no ramps, there's no accessibility for those offices. That to me is very important. And if it was $1 million to just spruce things up, then absolutely I wouldn't support that at all. But I think it's probably disingenuous to suggest that it's an indulgence of what we are doing here. I don't think we've really spoken enough about the functional requirements that we need of this chamber. Most of the time, the chamber is used by staff for meetings. And now there is a ceremonial aspect of the chamber, but when council is not in session, as with most councils, they do use it during the day for a functional staff meeting room. And I think it's important to recognise that this is not, in federal parliament, they don't hold little staff meetings in there when it's not sitting. This is a little bit different, and we're a bit more adaptive as a council. When council is sitting, it's a chamber. When it's not sitting, it's a staff room. And I think, I'm not a staff room, but a meeting room, and as part of the organisation. As a small council, we have to be careful not to be too precious about some of these things, because we have no place really, for lots of staff to have meetings. We've got the town hall, we've got the chamber. There's not really any other meeting rooms that I've seen. So, we need to be respectful of that. The idea of having a lift to elevate somebody to the mayor, I think that's ridiculous. Having it flat is more accessible. The idea that the mayor should be up on some grand thing. Look, I respect that that's the way it's been done in the past, but I think we need to be careful not to hold on to these things too much when it comes at the cost of other things. And I don't think putting a lift to lift someone up to the mayor is I don't think that's appropriate at all. So what these changes are doing are making the chamber more accessible and functional. So functional for staff during the day and accessible for everyone that want to come to a meeting. Because really, if a chamber is to embody democracy, then it must be accessible to everyone it represents. Otherwise, we're actually letting ceremony get in the way of actually representing the people. So that's why I think it's important that we put the accessibility above anything else. And I might just say on the heritage aspect of it, I appreciate that heritage is a very important part of Hunters Hill, and the facade of the chamber is absolutely one of the most beautiful examples of that. and I can't. We would protect the facade of Hunters Hill Council Chamber, indefinitely. The reality is that the insides were burned out in the late 70s and rebuilt in the 80s. Whilst there are elements of heritage in there, as we've been, the heritage consultants suggested that it's elements of the brutalist movement. Well, I don't think brutalist is a great place for a workplace, but I think that whilst we preserve things like elements of brutalist architecture around the place, it is not necessarily, the brutalist movement is not necessarily something that Hunters Hill itself is obliged to protect. We have examples of this sort of architecture around Sydney. A few bricks in the Hunters Hill Town Hall. If they were to go, I don't think we'd be. I don't think the brutalist movement would be. Would be dead and buried. So I tend.
Anyone wish to move to extend?
I,
Councillor Miles, Councillor Williams, those in favour?
Thank you. I tend to think that we need to separate something that has heritage value from something that has sentimental value. And I think that maybe where heritage is enduring and it's part of the community and it means everything to everybody. I think sentimentally, some particular rooms might mean something to to individual people like ex-mayors or ex-councillors or whatnot. I don't think that the inside of the chamber has a significant heritage component in an enduring way that you could say about the outside of the town hall. I think that there are probably not that many relatively people in Hunters Hill that have been inside the chamber. I think everybody's seen the town hall. And that's not doesn't mean that it shouldn't be protected, but I personally don't see a huge amount. I see some heritage elements inside the chamber. I don't see something that would mean that we would sacrifice function in order to protect that. So I just think, so my view is that I want to, if it's not fit for purpose for council staff during the day, I think it's important as a small council, and we do need to be agile. We need to be as functional as we can. We are disadvantaged with our size. We're also advantaged as well. But if it means that, that some certain ceremonial aspects being kept detracts from the function of the room or the accessibility to residents, I think that would be a bad outcome. So I support getting it done. I support staying out of it. We have seen it, and I don't have a problem with what's going on inside.
Thank you, Councillor Collins. Is there anyone wishing to speak for the motion? Against the motion? Councillor Crassoy.
Thanks, Councillor Sanderson. I don't like to speak against the motion. I know how much thought that you have put into it and how rigorous your research has been. Though I do feel that since you first raised your concerns quite some weeks ago, the council have been subsequently briefed and had a fairly comprehensive briefing from Brian McDonald. Our input from February was taken on board, and I believe, and so within my speaking against the motion, perhaps the General Manager can confirm for me, I believe that all that is happening in the chamber now is that the dais is being removed to comply with universal design. And in order to do that, it will have to go back to the local planning panel. Neighbours will have to be notified. It will be on council's website for consultation. and there will be a consultation process before it goes to the local planning panel. Is that correct, General Manager? Through you, Acting Mayor.
Through you, Mr. Chairperson, to clarify that the scope that we're talking about, so the proposal, I think the comment was made before, and just to clarify, no work has occurred within the chamber. So it is as it has always been, the council chambers. The plans that went to the LPP proposed the pods at the rear and a widening of the doorway, and because of the pods at the rear, the dais was left as part of that proposal. With the section 455 that's going back, it is to remove the pods as per the feedback from the councillors. But in doing so, looking to remove the dais so that the floor is level and accessible for all, as opposed to requiring to put a lift in. The door that was originally proposed to be widened will be the same width as it is currently, and so the section 4.55 is required to go back to what the original door width is, or the current door width says. The wall treatment doesn't require a development consent. However, we have sought heritage advice, and that's a matter that it's a matter for the council as far as the wall treatment, and we've had feedback from councillors. The heritage advice is that the bricks have some merit, but there are also ways in which it could be treated. So the process would be that the section 455 would be submitted, that it would be exhibited in line with our community participation plan for 14 days. During that time, adjoining landowners are notified. A notice is placed on the front of the building, and also information is placed on council's website as part of that notification period. And I think at the briefing, we also covered the process that we have followed to date, and we have followed process, and we had our legal advice provided to the council on the process, just to be clear. So, Councillor Crassoy, it will go out on public exhibition for 14 days to seek community comment on the section 455.
Thank you.
Councillor Cresswell.
Thank you, Councillor Sanderson. And so with that, and with the briefing from the heritage advice, I feel that what is occurring in the chamber, based on a lot of the submissions that we heard earlier, some people might be a little unsure about what's going on there. I think with the feedback from the councillors, I don't think that the general manager or senior staff, the consultant or designers, have any intention to take away any of our historic symbolism in the hall. I believe that everything to do with running a council and being a council chamber will be retained, and when people walk into that room, they will have a sense of the room's purpose, very much so. With the new design, it will be accessible, and I just will briefly talk on accessibility and universal design, and I've just pulled it up on my screen here just so that I get the wording right. But in a nutshell, universal design and accessibility isn't about sticking a platform in a corner that actually would be costly anyway, but it's not about sticking a platform in a corner that highlights to everyone in the room that somebody has a disability. It's about designing something so that everyone who walks in the room and uses the room uses it equally and is included, and their ability or other ability isn't highlighted in any way. And so I didn't read from that, actually, sorry about that, but that's the intention. The dais needs to go, and with the advice that we've had, it can go. Modern leadership, to my thinking, has moved away from the great man theory where people sit above everyone in the room. I believe that modern leadership is about collaboration and collegiate work, and it's our job as modern leaders representing our community's values to be collegiate and work together. And with that, I don't believe our current sitting mayor, and I would like to hope that no future mayor would seek to set themselves above the room. The way the room would be designed is quite spacious, and I don't believe that anyone sitting in the room would be unable to see what was going on in a council meeting, or that councillors would be unable to see each other. So from a design point of view, I think removing the dais is not only inclusive, I think it embraces modern leadership. Now, that doesn't dismiss history or the sense of purpose or the gravity of the room that the chamber has always been and will continue to be. And I read that most in Emeritus Mayor Richard Quinn's comments. I thought they were very informative, and they actually made me feel at ease, as sad as I am to not support the hard work you've put into your motion, Councillor. I think that heritage and its significance, it actually deepens with time, and it becomes richer for the layers that we put on it. I have an old oak table that even in the 30 years that I've owned it has been stripped back and rebuffed and stripped back and oiled and stripped back and lacquered with the best that I have available to me, the best knowledge I have to preserve its beauty for a very long time to come, hopefully from one of my children. I don't think that the General Manager has lost sight of the values of our community and of this council in the briefings that she's had with us, and in the intention that we hope for the chamber. As far as the process goes, Councillor Sanderson, when you raised it quite some weeks ago, I was concerned, and for that reason I was quite happy to hear what would be happening on that. I feel very, very comfortable and reassured that the process has been followed. I don't think that the residents of Hunters Hill elected us to have our hands held on absolutely everything. We do public consultation. We do have many local groups, historical societies and the trust, and vocal people who do share their concerns. And we as the councillors are left with the decision at the end of the day. But what I really want to say is these changes are very simple. They're about contemporary inclusion, which a metal lift at the side of the room simply does not do. But with the removal at the dais, they are about contemporary leadership. And there is nothing historical in that dais anymore, apart from acknowledging that we have moved into a different way of collaborating. So with it in mind that I know, thank you. With it in mind that I know that all of our historical boards, banners, coats of arms, the sobriety of the room will be retained, and that the room will become accessible to everyone and usable by everyone equally, and that before that happens, there will be opportunity for consultation and it will go to a local planning panel. I don't support the motion, Councillor Sanderson, but I do thank you for your time and effort in bringing it to our attention and for the outcomes that it has had to date.
Thank you, Councillor Crassoy. Now that everyone's spoken on the motion, I do have a right of reply. I'll be brief because I think I can see where it's going to go. The motion was about process. A lot has been said about heritage. A lot has been said about other matters. To me, we are still, if we do not adopt this motion, there is still something missing in terms of our analysis of the heritage. In this case, council is the applicant for this this proposal. Applicants would generally get heritage advice. That heritage advice is what we have heard from Brian McDonald and from the architect. As an applicant, Applicants would normally get that advice and then proceed to CAP. CAP have the opportunity to scrutinise that advice. We're still missing that link. There are still elements missing in the process. This motion was about process, so I will continue to support it. I guess at this stage I can put the motion. So those in favour, those against. Motion is lost. Councillor Miles, would you like to put your foreshadowed motion?
Yes, Mr. Acting Mayor. I will be very brief. Obviously, we've gone through there it is.
But before you continue, do we have a seconder for that, I presume? Councillor Collins? Councillor Collins, I think. Okay, continue, Councillor Miles.
As I said, the first point really does, I think what I wanted to do is to recognise some of the submissions and views that have been reflected on tonight. Recognising the importance of the chamber to the community as the people's chamber. I mean, that's a sentiment that I think we all share. Really, it goes to the practicality of all of the facilities at council, and that accessibility and universal design principles that Councillor Krasso talked about. It's really important that we make sure that as our prime civic building, council is accessible to everyone. The works that are happening at the chamber, at the town hall now, and that will potentially, if passage of this motion is successful, happen in the chamber, does exactly that. It allows everyone the same access, whether or not they are different ability or whether or not, regardless of age or ability, it gives them the potential to access all parts of the town hall. And that's something that's really important, I think, to everyone in the community. And it's something that we adopt as a principle as council. And I don't think that we lose heritage by adopting that principle, nor by passing these motions to lodge the section 455 and end up with what I think will be a very good result for the community, which is a space that we can all use, a space that will be used more adaptively than it is at the moment, and it will give staff the capacity to do different things with the chamber. I don't think it will be any less austere and grander chamber because of it. In fact, the opposite. I think it's a really important part of our civic history that we continue to meet in the chamber as it is, but it doesn't mean that these minor alterations are going to detract from that. I think just the opposite. I think that modernising to a point and recognising that the chamber has to be as accessible as possible is one of our prime duties. So very happy to put the motion, and I hope it gets through.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Does anyone wish to speak against the motion? Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. We've heard a lot about accessibility in this debate and the need to provide it. The council chamber, as such, has always been accessible. People have, for 150 years, come into that space and it's been accessible. The only issue about accessibility is the ability for people to access the dais where the staff and mayor sit. And it doesn't diminish somebody to have a lift or a device for them to access a dais. Council is putting in a metal ramp in front of the town hall. Does that diminish people that come into the town hall by that ramp? Council is putting in, at great expense, a lift, an elevator. And one would imagine if somebody uses that elevator, they're not diminished by it. They're just vehicles to allow people to engage and participate. It is not a way of distinguishing people's disability. It allows people to access and to overcome disability. So the majority of the work that's being carried out at the town hall is not about access. It's about cosmetic change. We can list the access issues, which is the ramp at the front of the council. I agree with. We can list the ambient toilet. I agree with. We can list the elevator to access for the staff to move up and down the floors. So it's wrong to say that council is not serious about access and is not providing it. It is. And it's spending a proportion of those funds for the council chamber on making respectful access. And I disagree totally that we're making the council chamber contemporary and we're not affecting the gravitas or stature of the room and the businesses carried out there. It will radically change the look and feel and function of that room. And I might add, as I did before, the functionality of that room, or fit for purpose, is there. It's been there for the last 150 years, and more importantly, since it was rebuilt. It is used for a wide range of activities successfully. And as I said, it's used frequently by all council committees. It's used frequently by staff to engage with clients. Our business is not that large that you have large meetings. Most of the council staff's business fits around the council chamber table. And if you want to have a staff meeting, it's easily accommodated within the current gallery with maybe a couple of extra chairs. So there's no justification on the basis that it's not fit for purpose. It is fit for purpose. There's no justification to say council doesn't care about access and accessibility and inclusion. It does, and it's doing a lot to ensure that that happens. And I would challenge the view that because you make a room accessible, that you're isolating or pointing out somebody that has a disability. So to me, the changes are significant, do impact significantly on our cultural and heritage significance of that chamber. It doesn't add anything to the business of council nor its staff. And equally importantly, it is a lot of money being spent on something that doesn't have a justification in terms of its need to change fit for purpose. To clad the room with timber, which is now the proposal, is just mind-boggling. To have the room on a flat level, it just defeats the purpose of good participation and transparency. You do. I've sat in many rooms where you've got to look around people's heads to see. To me, the changes don't add to what the room is about, and certainly doesn't improve the opportunity for staff to make use of the room when it's not being used for council business or councillors' business. So to me, I don't see there's any need to progress with the chamber modifications, with the exception of providing some lift access onto the dais. To me, the stature, the cultural significance far outweigh any potential. I've finished, Mr. Mayor, that's fine.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Does anyone wish to speak for the motion? Anyone wish to speak against? Look, I'll speak against. I wonder whether the motion can be brought up on the screen just so I can see what we're speaking to. I don't have a hard copy of it with me. Again, I have concern about the motion in that we are relying on the recommendation of a heritage consultant who's been employed by council. There needs to be some scrutiny of that process. CAP is the process that should occur through. I don't see that the motion is required. I think having seen the former motion lost, I think this process will continue anyway. So I don't really see that this motion serves any purpose. Yes, it recognises the importance of the chamber, but unfortunately, it doesn't seem to understand the heritage significance in the way that members of our Conservation Advisory Panel would. I was concerned, as Councillor Williams was the other day at the briefing, about some of the understanding of what heritage is about. Yeah, and I agree with Councillor Williams that the chamber, in its current form, can be an inviting place. It certainly was attractive to me as a member of the community. I'd be sad to see it change. Unless there is any more debate required on the motion, I will, I guess at this stage we can put the motion. So those in favour? Those against? Motion is carried. With your indulgence, I wonder whether someone would like to move that item 4.9 be brought forward. There is a speaker, Councillor Williams, Councillor Miles, I believe. There is a speaker, so if we have that, I'm used to calling him speaker, someone contributing to the matter, his statement will be read.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. This is an address from Anthony Zaya, who is a supporter of the motion. We are residents of Village Road. We share a common driveway to access Village Road. The residency is occupied by Leonie and Anthony Zayad, and the other residence is also occupied, and they have a daughter and a son-in-law and 2 grandchildren currently living with them. We support the proposed parking restrictions along Village Road, which are to be tabled at the next traffic committee meeting on 19 March 2020 in light of the following. When motor vehicles are parked on either side of our driveway, we have no visibility of oncoming traffic as we exit onto Village Road. If motor vehicles are parked near the northeast boundary to our driveway, we have no visibility of oncoming traffic when we turn right after exiting the driveway. If motor vehicles are parked near the northwest boundary of our driveway as we exit towards the overpass, we have no visibility, which results in the need to cross the double yellow lines into oncoming traffic, which creates a dangerous situation. On occasions, we have sought assistance of passers-by in exiting the driveway. If there are no passers-by, we either nose our motor vehicles out very slowly to give some warning to oncoming traffic of our presence. This similarly creates a dangerous situation, especially if vehicles are travelling at speed. On occasions, we alight the motor vehicle to see whether there is oncoming traffic and then get back in the vehicle to exit the driveway and hope there are no motor vehicles coming down the road as we exit. The neighbours collided with another motor vehicle as they exited the property. It was fortunate no one was injured in that incident. Motor vehicles regularly travel at dangerous speeds around the curve of Village Road near our driveway. Indeed, in recent years, there were 4 separate incidents when motor vehicles mounted the footpath in the proposed area near our driveway, and on 2 of those occasions, the motor vehicles collided with the trees on either side of our driveway. The danger is exacerbated when 4-wheel drive or larger vehicles park on either side of the driveway. Visitors to our respective homes have expressed their concern of the danger when they exit our driveway because of parked motor vehicles. It is only a matter of time before serious injury or loss of life occurs if this situation is not addressed. We, Mr. and Mrs. Zayed, have a clear recollection when they moved into the property in about 1993, with no standing, no stopping signs that were in place near our driveway. A visitor to the home who parked on Woolwich Road in contravention.
Move to extend. Councillor Miles, Councillor Williams, of course.
A visitor to their home who parked on Woolwich Road in contravention of the signs was issued a penalty notice. We have sought the assistance of Gladesville Police about the lack of visibility on exiting the driveway due to the presence of parked motor vehicles. We were advised it was a council matter because council took over the responsibility for parking in Huntersville. On occasions, we have contracted the rangers of Huntersville Council to seek assistance to no avail. But for the record, we have raised this issue with council as far back as 2017. Thank you.
Thank you. Someone like to move the recommendation? Councillor Crassoy, Councillor Miles, seconded. Do we need any debate on this? Councillor Williams.
I have a question, Mr. Mayor. This matter was deferred from the previous meeting because there wasn't adequate information provided in the business paper to enable councillors to understand the issues that were being addressed in the minutes of the traffic committee. Now, I don't see any additional information provided in the business paper that assists in that process. A council staff member did circulate the agenda for the meeting, and from that I've been able to appreciate some of the issues. However, they are not available to the community and are not part of the decision-making process here. So again, I reiterate and follow up why the appropriate information is not attached to this business paper. To me, it's fundamental when you're making decisions, you need the information before you. It's clearly not here. Some of the elements of this I can see benefit in just by reading the paper, but the community won't know what the relevance of the decision is without that information being in the business paper. So I was just wondering why that hasn't been included when the matter was deferred on the basis that that information was required to be in the business paper. And I asked the General Manager through you, Mr. Mayor, as to what the reasoning is for that.
General Manager.
Through you, Mr. Chairperson, at the last meeting, the matter was deferred because the council wished to see the background information that went to Traffic Committee. As has been our practice since the beginning of the year, we've been circulating to councillors who may not necessarily be on committees copies of business papers, agendas to those councillors. This was done in the case of the Traffic Committee when the Traffic Committee was held back in March. A copy of the business paper was copied to all councillors at that time. In response to your question at the 11th of May council meeting, that business paper was recirculated to all councillors by one of the service delivery and special projects people. So the councillors have the information that was available to the Traffic Committee when the matter was discussed. Director, is there anything else that you'd like to add to that?
Councillor Williams, did you want to?
Oh, sorry, I just asked.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, George.
That's a precise summary. We did circulate the reports with the staff's recommendations and recirculated them after the last meeting.
Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
That's all very well for the councillors, but the community do not have that information before them as we make this decision. It's fundamental to any decision-making process for the information that it's based on to be provided at the point of decision. So in our case, the community can see the rationale or the information the decision is based upon. That was the point I raised at the previous meeting, and that is what I see lacking in the current meeting. There's no scrutiny here or transparency for the public to be able to see the fundamentals of the decision. As I say, having looked at the information circulated to the Traffic Committee, I'd be prepared to make a decision, but that's not here before us in the discussion, or and doesn't provide transparency.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Do we need any further discussion of the motion? Councillor Collins.
No.
Sorry. I'd like to propose an amendment, if I may, regarding the Signal Hill car park, because this actually includes, I just want to understand why, because we discussed this at the Gladesville Main Street Committee the other day, what the rationale behind having part 2 hour and part 3 hour. Is there some reason? Is there some rationale that I've missed?
Councillor Collins, is that a question for the Director?
Chair, to the General Manager or to whoever?
Yep, through you, Mr. Chairperson. I'll ask the Director to provide a response to that.
Through you, Mr. Chairperson, we did consult twice on this matter with the adjacent residents and businesses. There was approximately 100 letters sent out, and we only received 2 responses asking for the 3 hour parking. What was also clear from the sensors that are in the car park is there is turnover that's currently being experienced in the car park. And a few of the businesses have said how there's been an improvement in the turnover. Based on that feedback and the request for some 3 hour parking, the staff proposed some 3 hour parking to be installed and then monitored to see what the impact would be on the surrounding businesses and residents.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor Collins?
It does.
Do you wish to put an amendment?
I do wish to put an amendment, and it is just to make it all 3 hour. And then I'll speak to the rest of it after, but I want to just.
Do we have a seconder for the amendment? Councillor Crasso, I believe, was first there. Councillor Collins.
Look, I just think the 3 hour, most places seem to have, the shopping centres have a 3 hour policy. I think the 2 hours is a little bit short. I've had, I have had people complain to me about it, that it's not enough time. You've got to go shopping, have a cup of coffee, maybe get a haircut. 3 hours is a more efficient time, I think. And I don't think anybody would be concerned. I don't think anyone would be really pushing for the 2 hour. So I'd be happy to just move it to the 3 hour, have it consistent. I think it's better not to have it, one line here, and it can be a bit confusing. So just to make it simple, and I think, we can always have a look at it and see how it's working in 6 months, but let's just make it all 3 hour. I think that would be the way to go about it. If that has to go to traffic committee, maybe we could do that by circulation. But I'm not sure if it would have to. So I just amend that. And as far as the other stuff, I tend to agree with Councillor Williams. I would like a little bit more.
We're dealing with your amendment at the moment, Councillor Collins.
Oh, okay. Well, then that's all I have to say about that particular amendment. But I have things to say on the other matters, but we can do that later.
Okay. Do we need any further discussion on the amendment? Okay. Councillor Williams.
Mr. Mayor, in terms of the proposed amendment, I think that's a good idea, but I think we need to be specific about the times as well as the duration. Just saying make it all 3-hour parking. I think there are other aspects to that in terms of days and period that you don't want to limit parking after 6 o'clock or whatever. So anyway, I just think to make it clear, it needs to have those additional aspects to it, which in the business paper.
Yeah, I agree. It's in there. Okay.
Somewhere. Yeah, it's just a minor thing, but I think it makes it clear. It's
Thank you.
between 8:30 a.m. and 6 p.m. Monday to Sunday.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Collins, could we take it that what your intent is to change the 3 hours, but the times would remain, the times of application would remain the same as they are in the proposal?
Yes, it's a good point. But you're right. Yes, we can just specify that. Just switch the 3 hour, but the same bands of time.
Good. Thank you. Is the seconder happy with that amendment?
I am, though I would just like to ask a question, if I can, through you, Acting Chair, to the General Manager. Because I seconded it, so I do agree with it, but what Councillor Collins is doing here is amending the minutes of another meeting. Is that something that we can do?
Through you, Mr. Chairperson, what we'd need to do is just refer it back to the Traffic Committee. So what I would suggest is if we copy the resolution of the Traffic Committee with Councillor Collins's concurrence, change the 2 hours to 3 hours so it's clear, which picks up on Councillor Williams' point about being specific. But my understanding is it needs to be referred back to Traffic Committee before it can be enforced. Is that correct, Director, Service Delivery?
That's correct, General Manager. If we want to take this particular item out and, for example, adopt the others, we can refer that item back to Traffic Committee for future minutes to come back.
I think maybe I'll accept the motion. The amendment would be to accept the minutes, but just because there's minutes and recommendations, but accept most of the recommendations except for one. So the minutes be accepted, but recommendation regarding Signal Hill Car Park referred back to the committee for 3 hour or whatever, however you want to word that. And the other issues.
Councillor Collins, one amendment at a time, please.
It's the same amendment, Chair. It's just,
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chairperson. Apologies, Councillor Collins. We just can't keep up with you with the typing. So if you could please give us one moment. No.
And can I make a suggestion that we accept recommendations 3.1 and do it that way? 3.2.
Well, you seem to be changing your proposal.
No, it's not at all. It's it's just a matter of process.
All right. Okay.
It is the thing is to accept the minutes and the recommendations. We're just trying to split out one of the recommendations and not accept that. So accept the minutes and recommendations 3.1, 3.3, 3.4, or maybe just say accept 3.2, which will refer back to the committee.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chairperson. If if it's acceptable, we could say that the adoption of the minutes and recommendations for the local traffic committee held on the 19th of March 2020 be accepted, comma, with the exception of 3.2.
Perfect.
And then second point,
Yep.
that 3.2 be amended to provide 3 hours. And then just, if we copy the current recommendation, but change 2 to 3. Yep. And then 3, that item 3.2 be resubmitted to the traffic committee for their consideration. If that's acceptable, Councillor Collins.
Yeah, that's fine.
Are you there?
All right. Okay, we've got a movement seconder for the amendments. Can I put the amendment? Those in favour? Or sorry, Councillor Crassoy, I didn't see your hand up there. Councillor Crassoy.
I did just want to very briefly speak to it. Thank you, Councillor Sanderson, mainly because the Gladesville Main Street Committee have been bringing this back to meetings for, I'd say, a year now. And we have on several occasions questioned the 2 and 3 hour aspect of the Signal Hill car park. And I just did want to reiterate that on the street there is 1 hour parking and half-hour parking. And in the car park a little bit further down the hill, there is 2 hour parking. So this one small car park offering 3 hour parking seems like a really nice solution for those businesses that want people to come and have a bit of lunch and do a bit of shopping or get their hair done as well. And in making the whole car park 3 hours, the Main Street Committee felt that it would alleviate the risk of confusion of people walking in, driving in and seeing a 3 hour sign straight ahead and then parking on the left in a 2 hour zone. So for that reason as well, we just felt that it would be neater to see it as 3 hours. So we're grateful to Councillor Collins for suggesting the amendment to the Traffic Committee's minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crassoy. Is there any further discussion required on the amendment? Can I put the amendment? Those in favour? It's unanimous. We have the amendment. Do we need any further discussion on the motion itself?
I just want to briefly say I would like to see a little bit more in the business paper of the reasonings why. I think as Councillor Williams might have alluded to, just the reason why these sort of outcomes have been, rationale. I think it might help people to understand why these decisions have been made. But other than that, I've got nothing more to say.
Thank you, Councillor Collins. We need any further discussion on the motion? Can I put the motion? Those in favour? Again, unanimous. Okay, we can move back to item 4.1. Moved Councillor Collins. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Williams. Do we need any discussion on or debate on this motion? Councillor Collins.
I've just got a couple of questions, and I'll briefly speak on it. I just want to check. So I've seen that we've changed the footpaths from the 3 in Woolwich over to. There's a lot more here, but I just wanted to Ferry Street from Foss Street to Takuya Road. Just want to clarify what that is, because that was my understanding is that was paved in March. You're talking about the other side?
Through you,
General Manager.
Through you, Mr. Chairperson, to the Director Service Delivery and Special Projects.
Through you, Mr. Chairperson. The summary you're seeing there is based on a segment of road. The data we've got is very specific, and it's down to a 20-metre segment. It's very difficult to display the level of information we've got in our system on here precisely, but it's in that segment. We do have plans which we will present to councillors at a future briefing.
But is it on the southern side? Because I mean, the entire part's just been paved. I'm just wondering. Yeah, Fairy Street, we've got in the Council of Alton that the pavers were lifted up and repaved. That's the exact same section. So I'm just wondering if that's an error.
Through you, Mr. Chairperson, that's on the other side of the road. But I take your point that on this explanation, you probably need a bit more detail to see if it's on the east or west. But we can see that on the aesthetic dashboard that we're looking at. So it's probably just been summarised here to fit it on the report.
Okay. Do you know how much the other side of the road costs to have it all repaved?
Through you, Mr. Chairperson, we'll have to come back to you, Councillor.
Okay, I'm just concerned that the other side of Fairy Street there isn't probably in that bad of a state. I just want, yeah. Yeah, all right. We maybe take that on notice, or
Yes.
yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Collins.
Next question I've got, on the left-hand side, we've got section 7.12 projects footpaths, $440,000. What's that for? It's down the bottom on the left-hand side.
General Manager.
Through you, Mr. Chairperson, to the Director of Service Delivery, if you have the program in front of you, or
through you, Mr. Chairperson, that comes from the section 712 projects, which I don't have in front of me. It was a part of a previous council minute. But
what actually is it? What is it referring to? Is that a whole another footpath project?
program?
Do you know where they are? Or?
Yep. So through you, Mr. Chairperson, it's a list of works that's funded through 712, which are developer-funded works. The Director of Finance and Corporate Strategy may have the list in front of her, but I believe it was in the last council report on the draft budget. Director of Finance and Corporate Strategy.
Yes, I do have the list in front of us. So this is the itemised projects that are in the Section 12 report. So would you like me to read them out?
Can we share? Can you see it?
No, through you, Mr. Chairperson, what we can do is send it out to you, councillors. It would be the list in the adopted 712 plan, which should be on our website now. The council adopted that in December 2019.
So, final question is when will councillors and the community be shown the asset review that's been done, and will that be made public? That's a question through the chair to the general manager. We've had a full review, and I just want to know when it will become public.
Yep, through you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Chairperson. As councillors are aware, we are going through a process of preparing a digital asset management plan. We provided a briefing in February at our strategy session, and we are still working through with the two companies that are preparing that for us. The council have been previously advised that once this project is complete, we will be one of the first councils in Australia to have a digital asset management plan. Because of the process and because of the detail that we are going through, the process has taken a bit longer than we had anticipated. And as mentioned previously, the pandemic hasn't helped with timeframes either. I understand the director is working with his team and the two consultants to progress that work as quickly as possible. I advised the councillors today that we will have a briefing in a couple of weeks to provide more detail in where that work is up to. Director, have you got an indication? I know you're still working with the companies for a firm date. Do you have an indication of when it's likely we'll have something in more detail for the councillors.
Through you, Mr. Chairperson, I've sent out an invitation to one of the companies that's collected all of our asset data to present an image of a map showing where all the data has been collected and where all the different condition pavings have been shown. We're yet to confirm the date, but I've been told within the next 2 weeks, and I'll confirm through the General Manager their availability. They have been delayed due to COVID-19 and being able to visit their sites in person, which is what auditing the pavements takes. We did have the quad bikes and the van drive through our streets, but they do have a backlog of works that they haven't been able to undertake.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. I'd like to start by saying I think the staff are doing an excellent job.
I think I'm speaking to this. I'm not sure why I've moved this, and I'm not sure why you're...
Councillor Collins, I thought you were asking a series of questions, and then you paused. Councillor Williams indicated you wish to speak.
I haven't finished speaking, and I haven't spoken to this motion yet. So is it Councillor Williams intending to speak to the motion?
Councillor Williams may have had a question. Do you have a question, Councillor Williams?
No, Mr. Mayor, I agree with, no, Mr. Acting Mayor, I agree with you. I thought the proceedings had concluded with Councillor Collins, and I wish to speak to the motion.
Good. Thank you, Councillor Williams. Could you speak to the motion, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, Acting Mayor.
I have not yet spoken. I've not yet spoken. I've moved this motion, and I'm entitled to speak to the motion. I've just indicated that. So what's...
Councillor Collins, will you please speak briefly to the motion?
I'll speak within my allotted time, Mr. Chair. Now, first of all, I acknowledge all the work that's been done on this. I think it's fantastic, and I'm not in any way... I understand that it's taken longer than was anticipated, but I put no blame on staff or even the contractor. I suspect that they probably didn't realise the expanse of what had to be done, and that's completely understandable. So from my perspective, I'm not in any way suggesting that it should have been here earlier. What I want to be sure of is that what comes out of this, and this is the truth on the state of our assets that's been that hasn't been transparent to the public for 10, 20 years, maybe longer, a very, very long time. It is not something that's popped up in the last 2 years. I'm very adamant that the information that is gleaned from this exercise is made public and is transparent, so that the community can see the state of our assets and what they're in. I've seen on Friday when I attended the meeting, I've seen a map of footpaths at 20-metre segments. And I think everybody should see that. I think all councillors should see that. And we need to know the state that things are in so that we can make the decisions that we need to make. And this works program does not take into consideration the massive backlog that we've uncovered. We haven't completely quantified it yet, but it is reasonable to, from the information that the staff have now, is that spending $112,000 on footpaths, on the footpath renewal, isn't going to cut it. It's not even going to come close. And that's what's proposed here. Now, this program was set about back in, I think, 2015, and it was a 10-year program. The roads assets were based on spending $500,000 a year rather than what needed to be done. The footpath program is spent, I think, $150,000. not based on what needs to be done. So unfortunately, the budgetary pressures have over a long period of time, and it is more than 10 years. It's hard to say how much longer. Over a long period of time have left us in a point where we need to catch up. And if anybody's in doubt as to the extent of that, then they really need to see the data that I've partly seen and want to see more of. Now, what we are going to have to do as a council is to go to the community and to show them what we know, to show them what hasn't been done over the past 20 years. And we need to explain to them why we will probably need to take out a T-Corp loan to catch everything up and bring everything up to scratch and pay it off over a long period of time. That's a motion of council, I think, that's at the moment for us to look at a T-Corp loan. And I'm not sure if those conversations have begun, but knowing now and having known for a while that the infrastructure backlog, whilst it may not be completely quantified at this point, the staff are aware that it is a lot bigger than was represented in financial reports in the past. I think that's fair to say that, you know, that's the case. And what was in the financial statements in the special schedule 7 last year, I think it was a 600% increase. From what I saw on Friday, at least regarding the footpaths, it doesn't seem far off the money. It doesn't seem far off the money. So I will continue to bring this to council's attention and to the community's attention that this information, when it is finished, must be made public. It absolutely must be made public so everybody can see why decisions are made. At the moment, we've just been given a list of footpaths, and yes, they all need doing, but everyone's entitled to know why their footpath has not been fixed and what the priorities are. And the rationale behind all that is in the public interest. And I just want to be sure that when this information is available, I will be strongly, very strongly advocating to make it all public and transparent. I would hope that I would have support among this council to make sure that is the case. So I support the motion because it is a better set of footpaths than was previously proposed, but it is nowhere near enough what we need to be spending. We probably need to be spending a multiple of 5 for several years to catch up. Now I'm finished. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Collins. Does anyone wish to speak against the recommendation? Anyone wish to speak for the recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. What I would like to say is a couple of points. The first is congratulations to the staff for providing what I believe is the first comprehensive and defendable compilation of the state of our assets. It's something that last year was obviously needed, and the staff have gone about it in a way that is now leading local government, not only in New South Wales, but probably across Australia. So I congratulate the staff for doing that. I'd like to make it clear that during the briefing by the contractor, he did not paint a gloom and doom scenario as we've just heard. He said our assets are in a reasonable condition for the type of council in the position we're in. And I think we should all hold fire until we have the full process on the table. Good policy and strategy come from evidence-based decision making. And that's what our quest is at the moment. We are gathering the necessary information. We've done that now on the assets with the exception, I think, of drainage. We're still exploring that. But the other important part of the jigsaw puzzle, which Councillor Collins hasn't referred to, which I think is important in developing the strategy, and I think the staff share that view in the document we have here, is that there needs to be a community consultation process to be gone through to establish the level of service that the community is prepared to accept. And only when you bring together the raw data or the data as compiled in terms of the actual condition of the assets and what people are prepared to accept in terms of the condition of the assets, can you meaningfully go forward with a asset management strategy? It's a twofold process. And I'm not going to run out and get a T Corp loan without the full information available to us. And I agree wholeheartedly, there needs to be more transparency in this process and a lot of council's business by engaging with the community during the journey, not just at the end. There's a lot of invaluable information available through the consultant to present date, the process we've been through, the indicative data we've collected, the groundbreaking leadership that's being provided in presenting and collecting this information, and the type of information that'll be available to the community when the process is complete. And I would think to go through the process of being able to determine the level of service our community expects, we will have to show, and quite clearly, I am very keen to show the community what the outcome of that technical analysis of our assets is, because that's the only way the community can engage with us to provide us with what they see as the meaningful level of service for our assets. And we don't live in a perfect world. Not every asset will be pristine, and you have to trade off against the asset's condition some of the other attributes which are competing with that asset. Trees are an obvious one. Trees will always disrupt footpaths. If the community wants a footpath that's going to last 50 or 100 years, then the trees have to go. And I'm sure that's not going to be the outcome. The community will have to accept some level of service less than perfection. And I'm sure our community is mature enough and will engage with us to come to what is a meaningful outcome. And you can't go running off borrowing money until you have that basic information available. Sure, there may be a shortfall, but from what the consultant was saying, who has gone through a rigorous process of collecting data, of collecting information and sitting down and interpreting that, he does not see it as being an insurmountable problem. And he says that they're in reasonable condition for the council and where we're at in our cycle. So let's get the evidence on the table. Let's engage with our community to understand what their expectations are for our assets and the level of service they are expecting of us. And then at that point, we look at how we can fund the process, because without going through that, we're running blind. And I don't think council should put itself in that position. So in conclusion, I congratulate staff on where they've got to at the moment. I agree we need to be reporting to the community where we're at and what we've been doing and where the process is leading. And I think then we need to engage with the community to determine that level of service that's acceptable to them. And from that, we can then genuinely interpret and understand how we move forward. Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Do we need any further debate on the motion, or can we put it at this stage? Can I put the motion?
Aye. So
It's right to reply. Councillor Collins. Councillor Collins is right to reply.
Okay. Councillor Collins, right to reply.
no one else wants to speak. I'll just briefly say that this is not a question of accepting something less than perfect. I'm by no means saying that we should have everything perfect. That's not going to be possible. What I'm talking about is not having things in a state that is poor or very poor, as is currently the case. Now, I brought a motion to Councillor Miles in February last year. The council adopts a policy of restoring roads, footpaths, curbs and guttering and all other road assets to an agreed level of service by council. whatever that level of service is. Number two, that council adopts a policy of budgeting for all required maintenance and restoration costs on infrastructure assets in the annual budget delivered each year. So if you recognise there's a problem, we budget to fix it. And the third is that council undertakes a review of all infrastructure assets and bring back a report to council in March outlining the estimated costs to bring all infrastructure assets up to a satisfactory standard. Now that motion was defeated, but I thank staff for taking the initiative and going ahead anyway to bring us a report on the state of our assets. We need to make sure that when that information comes back, that we are ready to make the tough decisions about how to deal with it. Now, to suggest that everything's okay, and as I'm not sure what Councillor Williams is suggesting from the consultant, but everything, absolutely my interpretation of what I've seen from the consultant and what was said is absolutely not the case that everything's okay. There is a significant asset backlog, and that will be revealed when the final report is brought to us when it's ready. And it's not, it's not the fault of the staff when it comes to us. They are simply reporting on what is the case that has been going on for 10, 20 years. Councils long before us. But maintenance has been skimped on over a very long period of time, and it has left us in this position. So we need to now pick up the slack and deal with the situation. So one final question, I just want to understand, just get a firm date of when we would expect everything to be finished. Is August the current time frame?
Through you, Mr. Chairperson, we'll need to come back to you. I believe the director, as I mentioned before, is speaking with both the companies to have an end date.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you, and it's been a great job so far, and I don't fault the staff for it taking this amount of time. It is a huge job, and it is going to be a tremendous benefit to the community once we deal with it. So I also commend staff for doing it, and I look forward to seeing the final results so we can share that information with the community and make informed decisions about what steps to take next. Thank you.
Thank you. Just before putting the motion, I'd suggest that I concur that staff have done an exceptional job to put us in the state that we now have such good information about the state of we are at the point of having a very good picture of the state of our infrastructure. And it's just so important, as Councillor Williams has said, that we wait and ensure that we have the information to make the right decisions. With the greatest respect, it would have been premature to start borrowing money before we really understood what the state is. So I'll put the motion. Those in favour? It's unanimous. We'll move on to item 4.3. Move Councillor Collins, seconded Councillor Miles. Councillor Miles. Oh, who would like to speak before the motion?
No.
Sorry, Mr. Acting Chair. We're on. Are we not on 4.2? Draft combustible cladding policy.
Apologies. You are. 4.2 then.
Yep. I'll move it.
Okay. Move Councillor Miles. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Williams. Is there any debate on this motion? Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. I've got a series of comments. Like, clearly, this is an important issue, and we need to complete this work and get our policy in place. But I just ask the question that, are we being funded for doing this additional work, or is this just a cost-shifting process that the government is put a policy in place and is using council to carry out the work. Is there any funding available for this through you, Mr. Acting Mayor, to the General Manager?
Through you, Mr. Chairperson, I don't believe so. I believe it's part of our regulatory function that we'll be undertaking in that way.
But additional regulatory function. It's not a standard thing we used to do. Also, it talks in the policy about a level of expertise that, from my experience in being involved as a general manager of a hazardous waste company, when they brought in asbestos as a key process to be assessed, you needed to have special expertise to be able to assess it. It appears that council will now have to have that sort of expertise. Is that the sort of expertise we have in staff? And if not, what are the training processes we'll need to do to bring ourselves up to speed? Through you, Mr. Acting Mayor, to the General Manager.
Through you, Mr. Chairperson. So we do have officers, compliance officers that assess buildings, and this would be form part of their function. The director, if you could, Director Development and Regulatory Services, if you could just outline the professional development aspect.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, and General Manager is correct. Our staff persons are qualified and have got that experience. And if there is an issue and a dispute is raised, the applicant or the owner of the building can provide a further report to clarify whether or not the building has the cladding that is not permissible. But in short, we have the expertise in-house.
Thank you.
Mr. Acting Mayor, another question, if I may. There's no reference in the documentation as to how it works with complying development and who is responsible. I particularly refer to Part 6 of the policy. So it refers to the DA process, but who's responsible for those that are done under complying development through a private certifier? Is that still council? Are we obliged to take the responsibility for that, or is that a separate process? Through Mr. Acting Mayor to the General Manager.
Through you, Mr. Chairperson, to the Director.
Thank you. These cladding, the cladding materials mainly on large type residential buildings. And having said that, the current cladding register highlights the type of cladding that you're not supposed to use. So if a certifier or a CDC comes in with that sort of cladding, first of all, they won't be able to use it. The manufacturers aren't allowed to use that type of cladding, and also the cladding register will pick that up. So there's checks and balances at the moment, so you can't use that cladding.
Thank you. Councillor Miles.
Through you, Mr. Acting Mayor. Again, to the through the General Manager to Manager Development Control. Are you aware of many buildings in Hunters Hill that to which this policy would apply and that need to have rectification works? Are there? Have you actually done that work yet and counted how many? I can't imagine there'd be a whole lot, but there must be a few.
Through you, Deputy.
Director. Yep.
Thank you. Through you, Deputy Mayor. You'd be surprised through the people through the registration process. There are a number of buildings that we've picked up in Hunters Hill through the self-registration process through the state portal, and also our individual assessment officers and also our building experts. More than 10, just to give you an idea.
Okay.
Thank you. Do we need further debate on this motion? Can I put the motion then? Those in favour? Unanimous, I think. Okay, move on to item 4.3.
Councillor Williams.
Is it moved Councillor Williams? We have a seconder, Councillor Crassoy. Anyone wish to speak in favour of the or for the motion? Councillor Williams.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I think it's as we're used to a very thorough report and very good information and a good analysis by the staff. So I've got no problems with that aspect of it. However, and I'm being a bit picky here because I read everything in these reports. In the draft General Manager's letter, I'm sure you probably pick it up in proofreading, but there's a formatting issue at the bottom of the page in dot point 1. But more importantly, on page 91, 3B, in the first line, it should be reasonably addressed, I assume. Is not reasonable address doesn't marry in with the flavour of the other dot points. It should read is not reasonably addressed, I believe. But having picked up those issues, I do commend the report and think that it is very important for council to be heard on this issue.
Any further, or anyone wish to speak against the recommendation? Anyone else for? I'll put the recommendation. Those in favour? Unanimous, I believe, again. Item 4.5, the shared depot.
4.4.
Sorry, what was this one again?
No, you're right, 4.4.
Sorry, my labelling has fallen off. Item 4.4. Sorry, moved Councillor Miles, seconded Councillor Collins. Anyone wish to speak for?
I'll speak briefly to it, Mr. Acting Mayor. This is an excellent initiative and something obviously that that has been ongoing for some time. This, along with another couple of measures, things like the library and the property strategy, I see as really essential to our operations moving forward. And this will also partner up with the property strategy in many respects. The staff have done a great job in arranging this shared depot situation, and it will come with some obviously capital expenditure on the front end, but the year-on-year savings of this shared depot arrangement, accompanied with things like the library service savings, are really those expenditure measures that you know I've certainly been pushing for a very long time, my 8 years in council, and it really does give us the capacity to not only work with Lane Cove in a cohesive way, but also get the best out of the facilities that we have in Hunters Hill. So I'd commend the staff in the job that they've done, and the general manager particularly, and George, and just say that this is one of those really important measures to make sure that we're financially fit to continue to chip away at that operational deficit that we have year on year. And without initiatives like this, it would really be, you know, we'd be spiraling further into a situation where our finances are you know, not being dealt with in a constructive way. So this is a great initiative, and I think the staff have done a great job on this. So commend the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. If no one wants to speak against the motion, anyone else for? Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. Yeah, I think it's a great initiative, and it's something that will put council in a positive direction as we move forward. The savings are not dramatic, but it does give us a platform to enhance and build on resource sharing and equally importantly, leverage greater opportunities through our purchasing. So, and I do note that it's not excluding the process we go through NESROC. I think that's important. But I'd also like to make the point that there's no evidence that council's operational budget is spiralling into despair. We had a report from council staff indicating that if we didn't have COVID-19 this year, we would have had a very modest surplus. I think it's $24,000, not great, but at least it's showing that council can work within its operational budget, and equally importantly, the initiatives that are now being put in place, like the library, like the shared services, and other opportunities available to council, as indicated by the General Manager in her 10-year forward plan, does put council in a good position to move forward in a positive light. And as I indicated when we talked about the budget for next year, we need to make it very clear where those assumptions are made that have relevance to COVID-19, because it is affecting our business, will affect our business for quite a while to come. And I think we need to be mature enough to recognise that component in our planning process as being something beyond our control at the moment. But the fundamentals and the direction in which we're heading in the future give us great hope that we will be in a positive situation as we move forward. And I think the evidence provided by the General Manager and her staff, along with several initiatives that Council's putting in place, does put us in a good position into the future. And I do thank the staff for providing, again, detail for what is a great initiative and making it an operational and practicable outcome for Council. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Collins.
Thank you. Thank you. First of all, these savings won't be modest. They're significant, and they are going to be it is a fantastic initiative. It's one of the strongest financial benefits that I've seen so far as a new initiative from this council, and I commend the staff for doing it. It's not just just chipping away at the edges here. This is a significant financially strategic beneficial arrangement, and the more things that we can do with Lane Cove in this vein, I think the better we're going to be for our long-term financial future. Now, regarding Councillor Williams' comments about the COVID-19 effects on our budget, as we explained last week, we are actually in a surplus this year because of those factors, not a deficit. So we were predicting a deficit. We're now in a $21,000 surplus. I thought we went over that last meeting. So you've got it round the wrong way again. Because of, I think there's various factors that were in the report of why.
Councillor Williams, do you have a point of order?
I do, Mr. Mayor. I find that offensive. Having it around the wrong way is his perspective. It's not fact.
Actually, it's fact. It's financial, a surplus and a deficit around the wrong way. That's a fact, isn't it?
Again, Mr. Mayor, it is Councillor Collins's assertion, and I dispute it.
What can I ask?
Councillor Collins, would you like to withdraw? I think it would be. I think that would be appropriate.
I think if you're losing money, that's a deficit, and if you're not, and you're actually making money, that's a surplus. And I hold that to be true, and so I don't withdraw the comment.
Councillor Collins, I took what Councillor Williams had to say was that we would have been in a surplus. I may have misheard him, but I took Councillor Williams to be saying that we would have been in a surplus but for COVID-19.
Yes, that's
I don't think Councillor Williams has things.
but that's wrong.
Councillor Collins, will you withdraw?
No. Because the statement was wrong.
I didn't interpret it as being incorrect.
Can I get confirmation that the General Manager, from the report last week, are we in surplus or deficit financial year to date? Through you, Chair.
Through you, Mr. Chairperson. The forecast is, as stated, a modest surplus. I think that the previous budget report showed that without COVID, we perhaps would have had a larger surplus. But notwithstanding COVID, we are still we are forecasting a modest surplus.
And originally a deficit was forecast. Through you, Chair.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chairperson. The budget that was adopted by Council in July 2019 forecast a deficit. Through the budget quarterly reviews, that deficit was reduced and became a surplus. The impact of COVID-19 has reduced our anticipated surplus to a modest surplus, but nonetheless a surplus.
Okay. So with that being the case, I don't withdraw the comment, and I stand by the fact that Councillor Williams had it round the wrong way. So if I can continue.
Please so.
Sorry?
Do so.
Okay, thank you. The evidence that we are in a spiral of financial troubles, we are chipping away and getting on top of it with things like the library agreement and this, shared services. There are all sorts of things that the staff have been working on to try and improve our bottom line. We need to make some big decisions, that are really going to have an impact. But this particular, I want to say that this particular initiative, which came, I understand, from the General Manager, it didn't come from, this is a fantastic example of, the General Manager taking a financial leadership position. I think it's over the course of this agreement, it is going to save us a lot of money and try and reduce these deficits, which is, at this current point in time, with the decisions that we've made so far, are still, ultimately deficits as far as we can see. But I believe we can change that. But it is absolutely true, based on the budgets that we have seen, that we are in a very difficult downward financial spiral. We are proving it, but it is by no means a done deal. So I will commend the staff on this particular initiative, and I look forward to seeing it come to fruition.
Thank you, Councillor Collins. Do we need any further debate on this motion? Can I put the motion? Those in favour? Unanimous, I believe, again. Item 4.5, the COVID-19 addendum to Council's access information and access information held by Council. We have a mover, Councillor Williams. We have a seconder, Councillor Miles. Anyone wish to speak for the motion? Anyone wish to speak against? Can I put the motion? Those in favour? Motion is carried unanimously again. Item 4.6, to amend the memorial policy. Is it moved, Councillor Crasoy? Do we have a seconder? Councillor Williams. Anyone wish to speak for the policy? Councillor Classell.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. I would just like to thank the General Manager and the council staff who've updated our memorial policy. At a few conferences that I've been to and taken myself along to in the last couple of years, I notice a lot of other councils really embrace this part of our heritage, the opportunity for people to remember the people who matter and the people who made our community what it is, and the people who matter to today's community and will matter to the future community. So while we had a policy which was good and fine, I think that this gives people an opportunity, and the promotion of it gives people in our community the opportunity to really contribute in the memory of significant people in their lives, to contribute to the beautification and longevity of the trees and parks and even public art, perhaps, of the community where that person is so important. So thank you for making it so much easier for people to find, and even to trigger the idea in some people's heads that they might like one day to see some little memory of themselves or of someone they love around our suburb. I was walking in Kirribilli the other day and I noticed all along the foreshore there are beautiful benches which are all of a similar style, and most of them have really beautiful little plaques laid into them about the people that have mattered to that area. So I'm looking forward to, and I know there are a few around here as well, quite a few, but I'm looking forward to seeing the ones we have perhaps improved. I know that over in Harding, I think it's Harding Memorial Park, the plaque on the benches there has been sadly vandalised and taken. So whether that family might like to replace that plaque or those sorts of things with a policy like this will be easier for people to do going forward, and for us to, I don't say take advantage of, but for us to enjoy as well, because those sorts of legacies are for everyone. So thank you, General Manager and staff.
Thank you, Councillor Crassoy. Does anyone wish to speak against the recommendation? Anyone else for? Councillor Williams.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. Yeah, I think it's important to note that this policy's been in place for a long time, and that it has provided many opportunities for our residents to honour those people that have contributed to our community, or just in memory of their family. And it does add additional infrastructure or street assets, either trees or benches or artwork or whatever. So we have had a fairly active policy in place, and the main issues that I see in the changes is devolving from a partnership between the Mayor and the General Manager to a delegation to the General Manager to approve these things. Again, I don't mean to be picky, but if this is going to go public, we may need to just consider a minor typo on 108, and it's in the part 4, part A, that's crossed out. The second line down, it says for memorial and advice. I think that should be and. It's just a minor thing, but it sort of needs to be corrected before it goes to a public document. But overall, I have no concerns about what's being proposed here, but I think we need to recognise that it is a delegation to the General Manager. That used to be a shared relationship between the Mayor and the General Manager. That's all good, and hopefully it will streamline and enhance the ability for our residents to make these sort of dedications and recognitions. So I commend the report.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. I did have one question myself, if I could the General Manager. That is, I did note in the materials used for plaques that copper alloys are excluded. Is there a reason for that?
Through you, Mr. Chairperson, to the Director, from a technical perspective, could you answer the non-use of copper alloys?
Yes. Do we have an answer?
Sorry, just got the mute button stuck. Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll have to take that question on notice and come back to you.
I wondered whether we could consider including them if they would be appropriate.
Through Mr. Chairperson, we'll explore why they were explicitly excluded and come back to you.
Good. Thank you. Okay. Any further discussion required on this motion? Councillor Miles.
Just to note, and it's not specifically about the amendment to this policy, but I do just note that in the past, and it's great that this has been done, we've had a pretty lax view about the memorials policy, and I know that it was a bit all over the shop for a long time, but I think it's really important that we map and monitor the memorials that we have, and I would refer specifically to Ron Kaplan's memorial down at Clark's Point, which was a fairly contentious issue at the time. I actually really liked the memorial, but we don't seem to maintain that memorial particularly well. So I think that, you know, it's great that we're adopting this policy, but just specifically on the monitoring and maintenance of those memorial places, if they are more significant than just a plaque or a park bench or a tree, if there's something that requires maintenance, that if we do accept the dedication of these things, that we actually do monitor and maintain them. I think this policy is great, and it will do everything that we want it to do. But just conscious of that, given my involvement in that issue particularly.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Any further debate required on the motion? In that case, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Again, I believe it's unanimous. Thank you. Item 4.7, summary of council investments as at the 30th of April. We have a mover, Councillor Collins, seconder, Councillor Williams. Councillor Collins, you wish to speak on this?
Just a couple of quick things. It's good to see that we've got the comparatives there for the reserves, which I asked about last meeting. What I think would be probably more helpful is to have the movements from meeting to meeting, quarter to quarter, between the last report rather than from a year ago. And the reason for that is that if there's a movement in the reserves, it would be, I think we need to, the point of having the report is for us to see if there's any change in the reserves. The specific one that I was having trouble following was the office equipment and furniture, which seems to be, I don't think that this report comes directly out of the, is this sort of updated manually? If I can ask that question through the General Manager, is it spat out, like, is it automated, or is this a manual report?
Through you, Mr. Chairperson, I'll ask the Director, Finance and Corporate Strategy, just to outline how the report's produced.
Yeah, we part of the ongoing expenditure IT transformation projects is we haven't done a financial upgrade of our systems, so a lot of it still is manual, not all of it obviously, but in previous versions. So as part of the quarterly review process, the reserve calculations, but also the internal restrictions are done through a manual process, and then we attach the standardised quarterly budget review templates that are required to the reports. But I take the point that we could include the quarterly comparisons instead, if that's more helpful.
Yeah, I think it would be, because I think the thing that was throwing me is the internal, in the annual reports from last year, the internal restrictions on office furniture and equipment was, I think, appears to be wrong, because it's got the thing that got me was that as at 30 June 2019, it's reported in the financial statements as 693,000 in the reserve, and in the following quarterly meetings, it dropped down to 104,000, and now it's back up to 500 and well, what is it? 554,000. So my query was that it had started about $600,000. It went down, which is perfectly explainable, but then it went back up again outside of a budget process. And it's important for us to sort of see with these. And what I expect is it's just a case of it just hasn't been updated manually. So I'm sure there's an explanation. But can I just ask that we check the annual reports from last year on office furniture and equipment, and just check that the reserve hasn't been depleted and then filled up again? But can I put that as a question without notice?
Yep. Through you, Mr. Chairperson, we'll come back.
Okay.
Respond to your question.
Okay, cool. So I'll send you the ones that I have questions about. But other than that, if it's not a manual process, then I'm sure it'll be a short-lived issue. The other question, we were, I understand, looking at having an investment advisor on fixed interest securities, and I just wonder where we got with that. I can't recall whether.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairperson, the Director, if you could just provide an update and our engagement.
Yes, we do have someone on a monthly engagement. We just happen to be meeting with them this week, actually. We're going to be finalising some of the proposed recommendations to the investment policy. So that will be brought forward to a council report relatively shortly.
That's fantastic. That's really good. Yes, good job.
Thank you. Do we need any further discussion on this motion, or can it be put at this stage? Okay, I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Unanimous, I believe. Item 4.8, legal matters. Councillor Williams moved. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Cresswell. Anyone wish to speak to this? Councillor Williams.
No.
Complicated process. I support the recommendation. However, and I do appreciate that we now have some meaningful comments in relation to what these items are dealing with. I was just wondering, as a question, on page 140, or was it 117, the second item, 926736, it says that the matter was finalised back in November last year with the judgment issued dismissing both appeals. I was just wondering why it's continuing to be reported, if the matter's resolved, or are there additional matters still to be dealt with that issue?
Through Mr. Chairperson to the Director of Development.
Through the chair, there's issues there where we want to make sure that further application doesn't come in. It's been reported, but then I'll report on the outcomes. I'm waiting for further advice from our lawyers, and I'll report this back to the council in due course. The issue there is that the applications were refused. We're waiting for the applicant to come back to see how they are to remedy, or what applications they'll be submitting. So we're just leaving it there to ensure that as a protocol, to ensure we don't miss it.
Any further discussion required on the motion? Can I put the motion? Those in favour? Anyone against? No. Motion carried unanimously again. We've dealt with 4.9, so that the last item we have is 4.10 on Bushland Management Advisory Committee. Moved Councillor Williams, seconded Councillor Crassoy. Anyone wish to speak to this matter? Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. I think it's important to just spend a brief moment looking at what's in these minutes. Council took some time to reinvigorate and change the way that Council got its advice on bush care and bushland management. And I believe, and what's reflected here, is that there's been an enhancement of the information that Council is now getting from the advisory committee. We've got a two-part process now, and a lot of the attention of the committee is about strategic and focusing on improvements and how best to deal with broad-based issues or issues that represent significant management issues in our bushland. And I think it should be noted also that the staff are being excellent in helping the advisory committee in sourcing some very good speakers and information, and equally importantly, being able to deal with the individual process issues that formerly used to dominate the previous committee. A lot of the support and a lot of the understanding of issues and problems that are occurring at specific locations are now being effectively managed and dealt with. And there's been a lot of engagement with staff and the respective bush care groups to ensure that they are getting what they need and issues are consolidated in a more direct way within the meeting process. But if you look at the current report before you, you'll see some pretty important issues that we referred to our Bushland Management Committee. For example, things like roundup policy, and equally importantly, the bush burning or ecological burn regimes, which are critical to us understanding how we move forward with managing and replenishing and reinvigorating our bushland. They're fundamental processes which we need to deal with, and I do appreciate the fact that the PowerPoints have also been included in here from the various speakers, which gives some background and information to the sort of direction which the committee is heading. We've had one meeting since this, which again dealt with more strategic issues and issues which were really engaging for those that were participating. So I thank Council for taking the time to look at the bushland process and to develop an advisory committee that I think is now delivering or will deliver as we move forward the right balance and the right approach for informing and advising Council around these key issues. Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Any further discussion on this? Yes, I would add to Councillor Williams' comments as the other councillor member of this committee. I'm pleased in the time that we put in to re-establish this group, and it is functioning exceptionally well. I thoroughly appreciate the engagement we have at those committee meetings. It is a very important committee of council. So if I can put the motion, those in favour? Unanimous again, motion carried. That brings us to the end of those items on the agenda. Is there any general business this evening? Councillor Crassoy.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. I just wanted to refer everyone back to the item about the memorial policy on page 108 when Councillor Miles raised the question about maintenance, because it was in my head, but I just couldn't find it quick enough. But on page 108, at the very bottom, item J, the policy does actually say that the seed or additional or new tree is advised to appropriate staff member for data input and inclusion in routine maintenance. So that is covered off in the policy as well, which is great to see. That was just wanted to add that.
Thank you, Councillor Cresswell. Councillor Collins.
A question. This is general business, is it?
Yes.
Question. I just wanted to, through you, Chair of the General Manager, we sometimes have that report update on outstanding matters. How often is that? Oh, is that something that happens automatically every quarter, or is it, or you just haven't gotten around to it? Yeah.
Yes. Through you, Mr. Chairperson. Yes, another councillor raised that same question, Councillor Collins. So our aim is to put something to the 9th of June meeting.
Okay.
But we're also looking at changing the format so we can, rather than at the moment, we manually produce that. So we type in the outstanding matters, looking how we can extract that from the Info Council system we use for council meetings, because we update that on the system. So if there's a way of actually extracting that, it will save us a lot of time and rework. But expect to see on the 9th of June the old format until we move to our new format. And
so generally, when everything's, as per normal, I understand things have been going on. Is it generally come every month or every meeting? I just find it a very helpful report. That's all. I just don't know. Through you, Mr. Chairperson, I don't know that we've had a regular pattern since I've been here. I would suggest quarterly would be good. But if we can extract the information from the system, a much more efficient way. Okay, great. All right, fantastic. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. No further general business, I presume. I presume questions with or without notice have been submitted before the meeting. It's a bit impractical to hand them up at the moment with the way we're operating. But if there's no further business, I believe we can declare the meeting closed at 9:08. Sorry, Councillor Cresswell.
Oh no, I was just waving to say thank you. And
okay, thank you. Good night.